Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler Barker. I serve as the coordinator within the Office of Parent and Family Programs. I'd like to welcome you to our What's Buzzin' at Georgia Tech webinar series. Today we are joined by the Office of Disability Services to kind of talk about some of the programs and resources that they have available through their office to kind of promote student success and also be helpful to your student. If you have any questions while the presentation is going on for our presenters today, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. That way we can answer those questions after the presentation. Once again, if you have any questions or just have any comments, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. If you'll give me one moment, I will transition to our PowerPoint slide. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our presenters so they can introduce themselves.
Thanks, Tyler. My name is Annie Jannarone. I am the Director of the Office of Disability Services, and I'm joined by...
Hi, my name is Sarah O'Shea, and I am a coordinator with the Office of Disability Services.
We thank you all for tuning in today. We want to talk a little bit more about what we do here in our office, give you a little background about who is eligible for services, what kinds of things we do for students, as well as how students register with our office. This is a really timely topic right now because of so many of our students that may have COVID-related concerns, and indeed our numbers are pretty high this fall, just looking at students who may have a risk factor or need some accommodation related to COVID. So we'd be happy to take questions specific to that as we go here. We have about 30 minutes worth of a presentation that we'd like to talk about, and Sarah and I are going to kind of tag team on this today. But I think one thing that we really wanted to start with and make sure is out there is the concept that disability is universal. We talk a lot about impairments, about health conditions, about a lot of things, but the reality is that any of us can acquire the disability identity at any point, including our students. And some have had disability-related accommodations in the past and maybe have either phased out or may not have even realized they need anything until now. But we want to make sure that we normalize this and we make sure that everybody understands that a lot of students are probably eligible for our services that may not have thought they were. And that's our biggest point today, that we really want to make sure that we're covering as many students as may need our help as before. So people with disabilities in general are the largest minority, quote unquote, when different types of impairment groups are taken as a whole. At least 15% of the US and world population are people with disabilities, and I think that's even higher today with COVID. 11% of US college students are, and 1 in 6 people are estimated by 2025. The key here, and this is really a key for Georgia Tech students, as well as higher achieving students in general, but most people with disabilities are limited really in only a narrow range of activity. It's when their health kind of impacts with housing or with academics in some way that they may need an accommodation, and that's our fancy word for a service that maybe we get between them and their professor, and we talk a lot more about what they might need. Certainly not their wider scope of social, vocational, or cognitive behavior types of things that our students are active in many different things, including all different kinds of clubs and organizations and academic pursuits and research, etc. So we're just there to kind of support if a student needs it. Slide, please, Tyler. Thank you. Okay, so some of the challenges and barriers, and I think as families, you're probably going to recognize some of these. First of all, that our students with health conditions probably have somewhat of a predisposition to contracting COVID. And those are the students we've really been talking to a lot in the last 2 months, just trying to make sure that we can help them with their course selection and the modality that they might need, that sort of thing, to keep them as healthy as possible. Also, the transition from the K-12 environment. I think there's certain expectations that not every student is cognizant of when they first get here, and that is that the next one, that they need to self-advocate here. We need to hear from them. We need to get documentation from them. They need to register with us. We don't seek out, although we do advertise, but we are not responsible to go find the students. We want to make sure that they know we're here, but it's a little different than the K-12 environment for that. Episodic nature of some disabilities, I like to include this on our slides because I think that that is the trickiest one for accommodation considerations, and that is when things get bad, I can't go to class. When things get, intense, I have some difficulty with participating fully with my academics. That's unpredictable in onset a lot of times, so we're needing to work with professors and work with students on the unpredictable nature of all that. Also, the differences in needs from class to class, and this has never been more relevant than it is right now. We have a variety of different forms of hybrid classes right now. What does that mean? Does that mean that they're in class twice a week? Does that mean they're in class twice a month? Online versus face-to-face learning is a big deal right now too, and we're finding that some of our students are requiring accommodations because of the online learning environment that they've never had to in the past. Another one that we put up there is medication side effects, that some students that are taking some different types of medications may have drowsiness, may have some other impact of that medication, that we actually have to accommodate that, not just the condition itself. So we definitely ask a lot of questions about that and how those things impact our students. And then finally, our students have a concern for privacy, and I think families would appreciate that as well. If a person does not have to know that the individual needs an accommodation, we are not going to tell anybody unless the student wants us to let them know. And we will never tell a faculty member, or even housing, for instance, what the actual disability itself is. What we will do is talk about what the accommodation need is for students, rather than labeling the student in any way. That information is kept confidential in our office, and we are very careful with it. Slide, please. So this is last fiscal year, which is 2018-2019. Wanted to give you an idea of what our students were reporting to us as their primary disability. And a very important stat right there is over 40% of our students are reporting multiple disabilities. And this has changed over the course of my career for sure. A student may talk about having a physical issue of some sort, but an overlay of anxiety related to that. And we're accommodating both things. 945 students were registered. We looked this morning, and I think we've got over 1,054 currently this fall, and we're only in week 5, so we're expecting a lot more students. But it's certainly not unusual for a student to be registered with us, and we really want to make sure that we open our door as much as possible for as many students. The highest percentages of students, and again, this is primary reporting disability. If they were reporting all of them, psychological would be on top. But ADHD is our number one at about 30% of our students are reporting ADHD. 23% are reporting a mental health concern of some sort. 15% of our students are reporting a learning disability, which include things like dyslexia, other things like that. And then some smaller populations are in there. Some that are growing, psychological mental health, I use those terms interchangeably. Autism spectrum disorder is actually rising as well, and that's a pretty good chunk on our pie chart there, as well as chronic health and systemic conditions. Slide, please. Okay. So there is Sarah O'Shea and Jessica.
Very pregnant Sarah O'Shea, may I
add. Last summer, right? Yeah. But it was a while ago. So our location is in the Smith Gall Student Services Building, also known as the Flag Building. Our testing center, we do have a testing center for students who need exam accommodations, is located in room 235. Our staff, we have 6 full-time, we have 3 part-time, and a couple of great administrative assistants who keep us running across our 2 locations. Our testing center in a normal year, and I think all of us can agree that 2020 is not a normal year, we will proctor nearly 9,000 exams. I think we had 4,600 or something like that for fall, pretty high, and we were anticipating around 9,000. So that was fall last year, I'm sorry, and then into spring. We actually only have about 10 seats in our testing center, but Smithgall has a large lecture hall that we use for our testing, so we can separate our students out and they can have as much time and space as they need. Our purpose, you probably heard it, of course, we want to be helpful, but we're also part of a regulatory requirement for the institution as well, that there is federal statute that says we have to do certain things as the institute to make sure that our students are receiving the appropriate civil rights that they deserve. Student wellness, coordination of disability accommodations, advocacy, those are all things that are under our umbrella. Again, we work very one-on-one with our students. We try to individualize accommodations, etc. But there is an underlying legal component there, and we are well above the minimum, I think, in terms of services for what is required under the law.
I think another thing to add to this slide is our office also hires student workers. Since we do have 6 full-time staff, we like to utilize student workers though also. They help us out tremendously with just day-to-day tasks, from shredding papers to making copies. So this semester, I know 2020, like Annie said, is not a typical year, but on a typical year, our office generally hires anywhere from 10 to 15 student workers, and in that mix is also federal work study students. So parents, if you have students who are doing federal work study and they have an interest in working with students with a disability, send them our way next year.
Sarah, I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I think one testament to the quality of the job that they do here is that we tend to retain them for a long time. They'll be here the whole year, their whole time during here, and it's a great experience for our student workers. So we definitely want to push that. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay. So our responsibilities, kind of going through the legal thing here, but a little more practical at this point. The first thing we do is we verify that anybody who walks through our door that says they have a disability, mental health condition, medical health condition, whatever it might be, actually is eligible to receive services and accommodations on behalf of the Institute. And I think one thing that's very important too about this comment is that we have a pretty broad definition of what a disability is, and that's based on some updates from the 2008 ADA reauthorization. So we really look at that in a very broad sense. We have the responsibility to help communicate their needs to other areas of the Institute, particularly to faculty and instructional staff, and I live on that a lot because that tends to be where our accommodations really are asked for, but also housing, dining services. Sometimes we're interacting with the Academic Success Center on campus for tutoring kind of resources. All of those things are things that we are responsible to do. We also facilitate some accommodations in-house. I've already talked about exam accommodations. We do a lot of that. But we also do things like converting print materials to different formats for students with visual impairments. We have one staff member in particular who does pretty much all that to make sure that our students are getting what they need in terms of their information. And then finally, we do this. We provide resources, education, and consultation to the university on access in general. Last week, the Diversity Symposium, which is an annual event here on Georgia Institute of Technology's campus, I'm sorry, was completely focused on accessibility, which I'm very proud of. I think that shows the Institute's commitment to making sure that our students have the access they need. Slide, please, Tyler. Okay. And Sarah, you may want to jump in on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want me to go over this one for you, Annie?
Yeah, okay,
you take a breather. Okay, so these are kind of the steps to having a student become formally registered with our office. A student first logs into the Disability Services website, which is disabilityservices.gatech.edu. And then they click on the far right-hand side, AIM Login. AIM is our software that we use, and they create an application. When they create the application, it will ask for documentation. And once we receive that, we will schedule the student for an intake meeting. During an intake meeting, the student will meet with someone like myself, a coordinator, and we will discuss accommodations or services that are to be provided to your student. After reviewing documentation and kind of discussing high school, did you have accommodations in high school? What's difficult about the university setting? And once those two steps have been completed, we then create an accommodation letter for faculty. Students, this is all done digitally. There's no more walking around and physically handing a paper copy to a professor saying, "Hi, professor, I'm Sarah, and these are my accommodations." It is all done virtually now. With our new software AIM that we have, it's really great because the student logs in, chooses their classes that they wish to have accommodations in, and specifically which accommodations for those classes. So on tech, there's actually a few classes that don't have exams. So a student might choose their exam accommodation for not that class, but they might need extended time to arrive to class. Speaking like we were going to class back in the past. So these letters are automatically sent to professors' emails from our AIM site, and the student is also copied on each letter. So it would be a total of 4 email accommodation letters going out if a student had 4 classes. Tyler, you can go to the next one. These are just a few typical accommodations. By no means is this the end all. There is a whole book of them. I will say that note-taking assistance is kind of a thing of the past, and we're moving towards a more digital software-based format, just because software is getting so great now. And I'm sure after the pandemic and COVID and all of these online classes, professors are going to be very tech savvy with their classes and how they put notes online. Exam accommodations, I can say, is probably the #1 reason why students seek out our office. Extended time on exams is probably the most requested. Remote learning is a new one since COVID. This is for students who have COVID concerns, who are on the high risk and moderate list of the CDC, and that their classes are on campus and they choose not to come to class on campus. Annie, you want to add anything to this slide? Oh wait, you're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry about that. Sarah, do you want to speak a little about Honor Lock? Because I think we've had a couple of parent questions about that.
Sure. So Georgia Tech adapted a new software called Honor Lock. In the past, it was called Proctor Tracker. I'm pretty sure it's Tracker, not Proctor Track. Don't quote me on that. And professors have been using Canvas Lockdown browser for a few years now, but Honor Lock is the new shiny car in the garage. And this software simply just records a student. So say I wouldn't have this Georgia Tech Tower background, but I would show the computer my office and show all 4 corners and show it my desk that I am taking my exam on, and I would simply start my exam. If I had extended time, it would automatically be calculated into my Honor Lock time, because the professors can go in and manually change time to reflect that accommodation. Students are then recorded while they're taking the exam. If Honor Lock suspects any suspicious activity, like a student leaves the room for an extended amount of time or multiple times for a long amount of time, it will flag a student. But it does record you, and a professor could go back and review your actions and see kind of where Honor Lock was flagging you. And that is essentially how you would take your exam, is through Honor Lock.
We have some students with some concerns about honor lock, and that's a very legitimate reason to come to our office and register so we can at least discuss the format with the faculty member if it's somehow related to their condition of some sort. So definitely that's a new one. We haven't had that in the past, so we're working with that right now. Thank you. Slide, Tyler. Okay. So students do have some responsibility, and I think I mentioned earlier today about how they have to self-advocate, and there's a couple of things here that they need to do. The first thing is they got to register with us appropriately, and that's going through those steps that Sarah outlined. Each semester, they have to request faculty accommodation emails to be sent to each instructor via AIM, and those go to whoever they want them to go to, and they can also go at any point in the semester, although we do encourage students to request those early so that the faculty members are aware, especially with this time period. They need to meet with each instructor, and right now that's a virtual meeting, of course, but they need to discuss how these accommodations are going to get facilitated. For instance, if a student is given some kind of flexibility for a deadline or something as a result of their disability and accommodation need, what does that look like for the individual course? They need to talk that over. We will gladly get involved in that conversation with the student if they need that, but it's going to vary from class to class, so they definitely need to have that conversation with each and every instructor. Giving reasonable notice for requesting accommodations, and I always put in here not the day of the exam, with a nod to our test center folks, because it's very, very challenging for us to, you know, if we're proctoring 5,000 exams, we're having a tough time if you're coming in the day before. So we do have some rules about business days and kind of advance notice on things. Also things like American Sign Language interpreters or captioning take a while to get in place. Even in downtown Atlanta, we still have to work on that, and it takes a couple of days, so we do need some notice. And then finally, I know this seems obvious, but we do get asked this a lot. They need to meet the expectations of the course. Our students with disabilities have to do the same thing that every other student has to for that course. It may look different, it may be on a different timeline, etc., but they still have to do the same things. So that's very important to communicate. Slide, please. Okay. I wanted to throw this slide on here. This is a slide that I typically give to faculty or to a TA group or whoever might be interacting with our students. But I want you to know the languaging and the messaging that we are talking to our faculty about. The first thing that we advise them to do is to make sure that they welcome students with disabilities. And there is a standard statement that many of them use for their syllabus that has that information on it, but also I did a survey a number of years ago of students, and I said, what's the #1 thing that your faculty member did to make you feel like you were accommodated? They said, without hesitation, they mentioned to talk to me privately, which was great. So very important. Normalizing that students have different needs, and I think this is honestly, I mean, if there's anything that positive that's coming out of COVID right now, it's that people have had to think more flexibly about the academic environment, and that includes our faculty and our staff. So people have different needs, people have different home environments, people are accessing technology that maybe they haven't before. All of this is new in a lot of different ways that they are interacting with their courses. We also talk to instructors about making the most advanced possible arrangements for the accommodations with us, and also thinking about, and again, these up here are for our in-person classes, which aren't too many, but thinking about path of travel, nearest bathrooms, fatigue factor, all those things can impact our students, and even in the virtual environment might as well. Various resources, obviously us, Academic Success Center, Stamps Health Center, GT Care, which is our counseling triage area on campus. All of these are things that we really encourage our faculty to work with our students on. And then following up with our students periodically to check on their transition. Finally, contacting us, and faculty are really good about that. They will contact us with any kind of question that they have or student concerns. We've actually been able to track down some students that are really struggling just based on a faculty email. So it's very important for them to realize that they can talk to us. Next slide. And I guess that's it with our overall slides. Sarah, did you want to add anything in closing here?
I will say I'm going to give some kudos to some of our professors. I have worked with some great professors during the pandemic and just want to give them a little shout out and thank you for being so flexible with some students who are requesting remote learning, and just thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah and about ODS. So now what we'll do to our attendees who are on the webinar, if you have any questions for our presenters today, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A chat box. They're here to help, here to assist in any way they can. It seems like we don't have any questions just yet. So maybe Sarah or Annie, could you talk about the spring and like, say for instance, if my student didn't sign up for accommodations because of COVID reasons, like this semester, can they still do it for next semester if something changes?
Yeah.
Sarah, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that one. So it has not been formally announced on how we are going to be having classes for next semester. But if we are still going to be in hybrid and online, students can still absolutely register with our office. They can register starting today. Fill out the application, upload your documentation. We will get you in for an intake appointment via Blue Jeans, and we can set up accommodations now. And then your student, I'm guessing if it is a COVID concern, that student probably has all online classes this semester just by default anyways. It just happened to work out that way for them. A lot of students, it just did work out that way and they got to stay home. But moving forward, next semester, if all of their classes are not going to be all strictly online and there is a hybrid class that is, or a lab that is mandatory for them to come on campus, we can absolutely put in a remote accommodation for that student. So I would tell them register with our office earlier than later so we can get you in for an intake appointment as soon as possible.
I just want to add a quick thing here too, by the way. It's that some of our students, the only accommodation they needed was to be prioritized for registration for fall semester. So we were working through some of that in the summer with phase 2. Priority registration for spring semester starts on October 24th. So we'd want to see the students, if they've got that need and need to be on the top of that list by that date. So it's really important. I mean, we're more than a month off, but that's a critical day that can really help a lot of our students. Secondly, though, I wanted to mention documentation. Sarah, we really didn't talk about that.
Yeah, we didn't hit that one really hard.
Can you mention that a little bit?
Sure. So the USG, the University System of Georgia, has a set guideline for documentation, and that's kind of our outline for what we accept for documentation. The link is on our website, disabilityservices.gautech.edu. Any kind of psychological evaluation that a student has from high school, private practitioner. If you're looking to have your student get tested, we do have the Regent Center for Learning at Georgia State, and we can refer them out to there. That is a $500 cost, which is actually a lot cheaper than a private practitioner. Sadly, we cannot take a 504 plan or an IEP from high school alone. It can be an additional documentation that we can look at, but that can't be the driving factor for an accommodation.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Seems that we have some questions in the Q&A chat box. The first one is, how do I get my son to come see you? What suggestions do you have that I can use to encourage him to get accommodations? He had them in high school, but he doesn't feel like he needs them anymore.
It's like the self-advocacy. That's a hard one.
I think, honestly, you know, I'm going to put my hat on here for a second with the COVID thing, but I think honestly it's a little easier now that sometimes we have students that have a tough time just walking through the door. Now they send an email, you know, to us really at dsinfo at godtech.edu. That's DSINFO, just to even ask for questions, and we're happy to get back to them for that.
And also for that parent that's asking that question, if your child, your student, don't feel like you're the only one that has a student who does that. I see multiple students who they come to me and say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have did this my first year. I had accommodations in high school and then I got to college and said, I don't really need those anymore. And then I took physics here at Georgia Tech and completely floundered. And now here I am. And I wish I would have came to see you. So it does happen.
The only other thing I'd add on that too, though, is all moving forward with accommodations and faculty notification, whatever, is completely at the student's whim. So they can come in and register with us and never use their accommodations. That's absolutely fine. We will not disclose anything without their permission or without their letting us know too. So they've got complete control the whole time.
Great. Thank you for sharing that information, Michelle. Where is the testing center located? I may have missed.
Second floor of Smith Gall building, which is AKA known as the Flag Building, next door to the torn up student center. Where Chick-fil-A was. We're next door to Chick-fil-A on the second floor.
Great. Are emotional support animals allowed on campus? And if so, what does that process look like for my student?
I'll take that one. I get all the doggy questions. Yes, they are. They are only allowed, though, in the residence halls. And then there's still some criteria about that. They have to have documentation, or the student has to have documentation from a mental health provider that says basically that the animal is part of a treatment plan for them moving forward. They also have to have permission from any roommates or suitemates. They can't just bring the dog in or the cat in or whatever in without having that permission already granted. And the third thing is too that they have to provide Fulton County updated licensing information, shot information, and all that kind of thing. And if that's happened in a different state or a different locale, that can get transferred to Fulton County very easily. But those three things have to happen.
Thank you. And for the parents or family members who perhaps joined the webinar late, could you touch on the process of getting just accommodations if my student is virtual this semester and taking classes at home?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So your student would need to visit our website, disabilityservices.godtech.edu. And then in the far right-hand corner, you'll see AIM login. AIM is our software that we use. Once on that page, you'll see application, submit an application. It is the middle button. And a student will upload an application on there, type in what accommodations they're requesting, and then also attach documentation to that application. Once they're in that system as submitted, then they will be scheduled with a coordinator like myself, and then have an intake meeting where documentation will be reviewed and accommodations or services will be discussed and will be put in place.
Thank you for saying that. I have another question for either one of you. If my student is considering graduate school and needs to perhaps take the GMAT, GRE, or any other post-grad tests, would they go through you all or perhaps another office?
Yeah, they actually have to go through us. The GRE people in particular require that we fill out a form that basically verifies that they were eligible for accommodations. We sign off on If their documentation that we have on file meets the ETS or the GRE folks' criteria, and they tend to be pretty strict. So we'd like our students to get retested, especially if they have a learning disability or ADHD, when they're still like a senior or maybe a first year here, senior in high school, first year here. So if that 4 or 5 year mark comes by, we have something that's recent for them. But yeah, we need to do that. I will say though too that I was in a meeting this morning too that a number of our graduate programs here on campus are going to waive the GRE or the GMAT requirement this coming year. So please check in with your program, especially if you're going here, to make sure that that still is even a requirement. I think that's not uncommon for a lot of schools right now that are thinking about this, and especially in terms of COVID, because the GRE sites to be able to get tested or to be able to take that test are just not that numerous right now.
And I actually saw, like, just a little side note, I saw that the GRE, you can take it at home on your own computer until the end of October, I think it is. So.
Okay. Are all accommodations academic based? What if a student needs help asking or approaching professor/TA with questions?
I didn't hear the whole question. I don't know if Sarah, if you did.
I can answer that one. No, not all accommodations are academic based. There's housing accommodations. That's not an academic. Academic is probably academic and exam accommodations are the biggest for our office. I would suggest if a student needs help approaching a professor or TA with questions, I don't know, maybe email the TA. I don't know. A TA I always feel like I would rather email a TA than a professor personally. But if that's something that is chronically a challenge for a student, then maybe come talk to us and we can kind of figure out a system to put in place to go forward.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think the important point here is that students can always come to us, but we're not going to do something for them. We'll do something with them. You know, so they have to have an active role in this conversation. But if they're feeling as if they're either one, not getting an accommodation, which is not good, or that they need a little bit more advocacy for, I don't know, time, office hour time, or whatever it might be, that's something we can get involved with. It's not necessarily much like the attendance thing. It's not something that we can necessarily require of the faculty member of the TA. But yeah, Sarah's shout out to faculty and TAs have been very important. TAs have really helped us a lot this year.
Next question is, I have a student with ASD, but if his challenge is being able to ask for help, he will sit for an indefinite period of time without even talking, without talking, even though he knows he might need accommodations at this time. Academically, he does very well.
I guess my question would be, what type of accommodations does he need from that? He'll sit for an indefinite period of time without talking, even though he knows he might need accommodations at times. Academically, he does very well. So I guess I'm a little confused. Is that like piggybacking off the last one?
Perhaps. Maybe just with the self-advocacy piece, it may be some challenges with knowing when and how to advocate for themselves, I'm assuming. But I guess we just have this parent maybe email one of you all?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
It sounds like it's a very individualized situation that our students with an autism spectrum disorder are very different from one another. And it really depends on, you know, the kind of thing that they're facing in their classes and the kind of interaction they have with a faculty member. They may or may not even need an accommodation. They may just need support. But please have the student contact us. or the parent can contact us directly too. Again, dsinfo@gatech.edu is our main email address.
Thank you. The next question is there any help with getting involved socially on campus or interviewing for internships/jobs?
Sarah,
Yeah, that's my fancy right there. So we actually have on campus, there is a great group, a club called the Able Alliance, and it is for students with disabilities and students without disabilities, or allies for students with disabilities. So that is a great outlet to be social on campus. Another thing that we have in-house in our office is called the Growth Group, and they meet every Friday at 11. Right now it's via Blue Jeans, just because that's the time we're in. As far as interviewing for internships and jobs, I could definitely refer out to the Success Center. They do a tremendous job at assisting students with their resumes, cover letters. I've had students bring me their resumes and cover letters and kind of go over mock questions that a recruiter might ask in that really intimidating job career fair that used to happen on campus. I actually went to go check it out for myself just to kind of see, what's Georgia Tech's caliber of the career fair, and it is very intense, I will tell you that. It's a lot of students in suits and all their resumes in their hands, and they all want all the big jobs. So I've actually had a few students come by and run interview questions just one-on-one with me. But again, the Success Center on campus does a tremendous job working with students with disabilities and without disabilities.
I'll just kind of add in there, Sarah, kind of surprised you didn't bring it up, but we are contacted every once in a while by a national agency, and I think you were contacted by Defense Department.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the mix with the NSA. So I get little interest groups that email me. An email push is going out this Thursday for every student that is registered with us. So that parent that was asking about the student who won't come see us or won't register with us, I do have kind of some insight on internships and job opportunities. Another big thing last semester on campus was Google. Google came on campus. They came out from California and spoke with the Able Alliance and talked about accommodations in the workplace that they provided. So if your student was ever interested in working at Google or a big IT company or Amazon or anything like that, that's an instant connection with someone who works directly for that company. But yeah, the NSA is one that is currently working with us. So students are interested in that, then our office is a great connection.
Perfect. So that sounds really cool. The next question is, I assume parents are not allowed to help our student contact you and work to define needed accommodations with you. Is that correct?
I'll jump in on this one. Students are welcome to bring whoever they want into the intake meeting. But again, it's that student's call. We're gonna probably not be real receptive to a parent trying to do the whole intake meeting him or herself. But I think if that student is there and, we can have a group conversation. We understand that parents, families of our students with disabilities have been there from the get-go, having to advocate long time. So we get they need to be there for some of our students, that they really want to have their parent there. That's fine. But again, that student's got to be the one who starts it all. They've got to fill out the application. They got to come to the appointment. They want to bring mom, dad, family member. That's great, but they got to start it.
Thank you for sharing that, Ann. Do you have any other, before we close out, do you have any other comments or just any other kind of hot topics that we've seen that you worked with throughout the first couple weeks of school that you'd like to speak on?
I guess I'm going to throw it out there because I'm in a couple of different forums that overlap our office a bit. Just to remind everyone that our mental health resources are as available now as they were prior to COVID, if not more so. And we can get them connected with the support they may need through our office, whatever. But I mean, we're kind of a conduit for a lot of different offices that are support on campus, and happy to do so. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would think that's a great thing to say right now. We are still on campus. We are here for students still. We miss seeing students. I do. I miss seeing students in my office every day and just hearing their voices. I know parents are probably enjoying them at home, but we miss them here too, and just miss their liveliness. So
Send them our way.
when it's safe.
When it's safe. Right.
Thank you so much, both Sarah and Ann, for joining us today. And also just thank you to the parents and family members who are attending this webinar. Please feel free to join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. We will be talking about student success, academic and tutoring. So please join us at 3 p.m. for that. You can find the webinar link at our website, parents.gatech.edu, under the Stay Connected tab, under virtual recording, where you'll click on the PDF file, which includes our full schedule for our webinars for this semester. So once again, thank you for joining us. Parents and family members, if you would like to view the recording of this webinar, please feel free to visit that same website as well. We'll have this posted to our website and YouTube within the next 24 hours. And so that way you can view it and pass it along to any other of your GTE parent friends. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Go Jackets.
Go Jackets.
Go Jackets.